The night was silent in the Himalayan foothills, where snow clung to pine branches under the silver light of the moon. The narrator spoke of ancient whispers, legends passed down by Sherpas of a creature called the Yeti. Jonathan Hale stood near the campfire, holding a weathered journal close to his chest. Jonathan Hale said, "I have crossed continents for myths, but this one feels alive, breathing." His voice trembled with obsession, echoing years of sacrifice. Evelyn Carter glanced at him, her eyes cautious, her breath forming pale cloud. Evelyn Carter said, "Legends like these bury men beneath snow and silence." Jonathan Hale's stare burned into the darkness of the mountains. Jonathan Hale said, "Danger only proves that truth exists." The fire hissed, sparks twisting upward, as if agreeing with his determination. The narrator whispered, "And thus, the story begins with smoke, secrets, and a restless mountain. At dawn, snow glistened like crystal beneath pale sunlight." The narrator said, "Legends breathe in silence, not in noise." Jonathan Hale gazed toward the horizon, his breath rising in steady clouds. Evelyn Carter tightened her scarf, her voice sharp as she said, "We chase shadows painted by fear." Jonathan Hale replied, "Shadows prove light exists, Evelyn. Somewhere, truth waits." Above them, black crows scattered, wings striking the sky. The narrator whispered, "Doubt is the beginning, and doubt sharpens truth like a blade." Jonathan Hale stepped forward into untouched snow, boots cracking with weight as Evelyn Carter hesitated behind him. The mountain stood vast and unmoved, watching. The wind carried whispers as they climbed, boots sinking deep into snow. Jonathan Hale said, "These paths feel older than time." Evelyn Carter shivered and muttered, or cursed by it. The narrator said, "Every mountain keeps its secrets and some bleed into legend." They passed faded prayer flags whipping against a weathered pole. Jonathan Hale brushed frost from a carved stone etched with ancient symbols. Evelyn Carter gasped, "These markings, they're warnings." Jonathan Hale whispered, "Or directions." Snow thickened, veiling the sky. The narrator said in silence, "The mountain speaks more than any voice." By noon, storm clouds rolled over jagged peaks. The narrator said, "The mountain tests every seeker of truth." Jonathan Hale balanced on a narrow cliffside trail, his voice firm, "Truth demands risk." Evelyn Carter shouted above the storm, "Risk devours the reckless." A gust shoved her sideways, but Jonathan Hale grabbed her arm, pulling her steady. Their eyes locked, his resolve against her fear. The narrator whispered, "Trust trembles when the path grows thin." Snow tumbled from cliffs above, warning of greater avalanches. Jonathan Hale pulled her close and said, "We go on, no matter what." Evelyn Carter closed her eyes, torn between reason and loyalty. As dusk fell, the valley drowned in shadows. The narrator said, "Every shadow hides a question." Jonathan Hale crouched in the snow, tracing a massive footprint buried in ice. His voice shook, "It's real, Evelyn, it's real." Evelyn Carter's eyes widened, disbelief melting into fear. She whispered, "No man leaves prints like that." The air thickened with dread, as though the mountain listened. The narrator said, "Proof carries weight, and weight brings fear." Jonathan Hale pressed his hand into the print, dwarfed by its size. Above them, the wind howled through peaks like a warning. The journey began with the crunch of boots against frost, each step echoing like a drumbeat in the silent expanse. The narrator said, "Into the unknown they moved, driven by questions heavier than the snow." Jonathan Hale led with steady determination, his eyes fixed on the ridges ahead. Evelyn Carter followed close, her breath unsteady, eyes wary as she glanced at every shadow. Jonathan Hale said, "This land holds stories etched in ice. We are here to read them." Evelyn Carter shook her head, muttering, "Stories that were never meant to be uncovered." The mountain winds screamed, whipping snow into their faces. The narrator whispered, "Every step further from safety is a step closer to truth, and truth never comes without cost." By midday, the snow revealed its mysteries, strange markings etched into the white crust. Jonathan Hale crouched low, brushing frost from elongated impressions. Jonathan Hale said, "These prints are no trick of light." Something large passed through here. Evelyn Carter knelt beside him, her voice hushed. "They are too wide, too deep for any man." The narrator said, "The mountain gave them a whisper of proof, enough to stir doubt and fear alike." Jonathan Hale's hands shook as he measured the span with his palm. Evelyn Carter pulled her scarf higher, her eyes darting around. The wind rose again, carrying an uneasy silence. As evening shadows lengthened, a figure appeared from the mist, cloaked and weathered, eyes burning with hidden knowledge. The narrator said, "The mountain delivers guides, though never freely." The informant spoke in a low voice, words like riddles carried by the wind. Informant said, "What you seek walks between truth and terror. Few return with both sanity and breath." Jonathan Hale pressed forward, his tone sharp, "Then tell me where the path leads." Evelyn Carter gripped his arm, whispering, "He speaks in circles. He means to frighten us." The informant smiled faintly, fading into the fog as quickly as he had arrived. The campfire crackled weakly that night, its glow unable to push back the dark. The narrator said, "Every secret has a keeper, and the keeper works in silence." Jonathan Hale traced symbols in the dirt, connecting dots of mystery. Evelyn Carter sat apart, eyes wary as if sensing unseen eyes upon them. Jonathan Hale said, "The truth resists, but I will not stop." Evelyn Carter whispered, "Perhaps it resists because it should." In the shadows beyond, a presence lingered, though unseen, watching every flicker of light. The narrator said, "The keeper of secrets moved without sound, weaving barriers of silence." The night grew colder. At dawn, the silence shattered. A shadow darted along the ridge above, massive and swift, leaving a trail of disturbed snow. Jonathan Hale pointed, voice filled with awe, "There, do you see it?" Evelyn Carter's eyes widened, her hand rising to her mouth. Evelyn Carter said, "It moved like no man I've ever seen." The narrator said, "Belief is born not of proof alone, but of moments that grip the soul with terror." Jonathan Hale scrambled toward the ridge, heart pounding, but the shadow was gone, swallowed by the storm. Evelyn Carter shouted, "Jonathan, wait!" The mountain returned to silence, yet the echo of something alive remained. Tension thickened as Jonathan Hale and Evelyn Carter climbed higher into the icy wilderness, their silence heavier than words. The narrator said, "When truth is pursued, allies fracture, underweight, unseen." Jonathan Hale stopped abruptly, his voice sharp, "You doubt every step, Evelyn. How can we uncover what you fear to believe?" Evelyn Carter's eyes flashed with frustration as she said, "I do not fear truth, Jonathan. I fear the obsession that blinds you." Snow whipped across their faces, the mountain groaning under hidden avalanches. The narrator whispered, "Trust splinters when belief hardens, and doubt becomes as dangerous as ice beneath unsteady feet." Their bond strained in the storm's howl. Night approached with shadows curling like smoke around the camp. The narrator said, "Not all who share your fire share your path." The deceiver emerged, smiling warmly, voice smooth as silk. "Deceiver," said, "I have walked these mountains, and I can guide you where others fail." Jonathan Hale's suspicion wavered, curiosity overtaking caution. Jonathan Hale said, "Then show us the way." Evelyn Carter's brows furrowed, her voice quiet but sharp, "Strangers with smiles carry hidden knives." The narrator whispered, "Betrayal is patient, dressed in charm and clothed in trust." The fire popped, sparks leaping skyward as the cold pressed closer. By dawn they stumbled upon a hidden village, its wooden huts buried in snow, smoke curling faintly from crooked chimneys. The narrator said, "Where mountains hide people, legends walk their dreams." Jonathan Hale gazed at faded murals painted across stone walls, showing towering figures with wide strides. Jonathan Hale whispered, "They have seen it." Evelyn Carter's voice trembled, "Or they have painted their fears." Villagers emerged, faces worn by frost and time, their eyes flickering with caution. The narrator said, "Knowledge lies not in words alone, but in silence guarded by generations." The snow creaked beneath hesitant steps as stories loomed unspoken. Inside a dim hut, an old man sat before a fire, his face etched with sorrow, eyes heavy with memories. The narrator said, "Tragedy speaks when silence cannot." The tragic figure lifted a faded cloth, revealing a necklace carved from bone. Tragic figure said, "My son vanished on the slopes chasing the white shadow. His footprints ended where no man could walk." Jonathan Hale leaned forward, his voice gentle. "Your story carries the weight of truth." Evelyn Carter clasped her scarf tighter, whispering, "Oh, the weight of grief." The narrator said, "In pain lies the spark that ignites the search for answers." Snow fell heavy outside as Jonathan Hale and Evelyn Carter left the hut, silence pressing between them. The narrator said, "Every revelation reshapes the seeker." Jonathan Hale muttered, "This man's grief proves we are not chasing ghosts." Evelyn Carter's eyes narrowed, her voice edged. "It proves only that legends consume lives." The deceiver followed behind, his smile faint but his eyes calculating. The narrator whispered, "When allies fracture and deceivers smile, the mountain grows darker still." Wind howled like a beast unseen, carrying dread through the valley. Jonathan Hale looked up, his resolve unbroken, whispering, "We are closer now." Snow fell in heavy sheets as Jonathan Hale and Evelyn Carter uncovered wooden crates hidden beneath a collapsed shrine. The narrator said, "Truth resists, buried not only by snow, but by hands that feared its revelation." Jonathan Hale pried one open, revealing weathered documents and sketches of massive footprints collected decades ago. Jonathan Hale whispered, "Someone knew, and they hid it." Evelyn Carter's eyes widened, her voice unsteady. "This is proof, but why bury it here?" The narrator said, "Because truth can fracture foundations built on lies." Wind howled through the cracks in the shrine, as shadows deepened around them. Later, as night cloaked the camp, Jonathan Hale felt unseen eyes pressing from the darkness. The narrator said, "The keeper of secrets moves quietly, yet his presence suffocates." A shadow lingered near the tree line, watching, unseen by Evelyn Carter. Jonathan Hale muttered, "We are not alone tonight." Evelyn Carter looked up, confusion furrowing her brow. Evelyn Carter said, "It's only the storm, Jonathan." But the shadows stayed, hidden, patient. The narrator whispered, "Guardians of silence do not reveal themselves in daylight. They move in whispers and vanish before dawn." The fire cracked weakly, its glow failing to warm their fear. By morning, the storm eased, and Evelyn Carter found courage she had buried in fear. The narrator said, "The cautious heart sometimes holds the strongest flame." Evelyn Carter stood tall, facing Jonathan Hale. Evelyn Carter said, "I will not turn back. If truth devours us, then it will devour me standing beside you." Jonathan Hale's eyes softened for the first time in days, and he nodded silently. The narrator said, "Doubt transformed becomes strength, and strength becomes loyalty." Snow crunched under their boots as they prepared to march higher. Above them, the peaks waited like silent witnesses to their resolve. That night, as the group rested, cracks appeared in the mask of the deceiver. The narrator said, "Lies unravel slowly, threads fraying under the weight of truth." The deceiver told tales of paths and sightings, but his voice faltered when pressed. Jonathan Hale leaned closer, sharp tone cutting through the fire's hiss. Jonathan Hale said, "Your words shift like snow and wind. What are you hiding?" Evelyn Carter's eyes narrowed, suspicion growing. The deceiver forced a smile, though unease flickered in his gaze. The narrator whispered, "A mask worn too long begins to slip." Silence pressed heavy around the fire. Deep in the valley, Jonathan Hale found a half-buried satchel frozen in ice. Inside lay a faded photograph of a man long missing, the victim whose story lingered like smoke. The narrator said, "Proof whispers through fragments of the past." Jonathan Hale said, "He was here. His story is tied to this mountain." Evelyn Carter whispered, "Then the Yeti is not the only shadow we chase." The snow fell softer now, as if the mountain mourned with them. The narrator said, every revelation draws the seeker deeper, and every answer binds them to the truth they fear. The valley echoed with silence. The climb grew treacherous as winds roared like beasts, clawing at the ridge. The narrator said, mountains test flesh and spirit when secrets lie near. Jonathan Hale steadied himself, gripping the ice axe. Evelyn Carter shouted above the storm, this path will kill us before the truth does. Jonathan Hale's voice thundered, then let the mountain try. Snow crashed down in small avalanches, rocks shifting under their boots. The narrator whispered, when danger rises, courage must rise higher still. Their figures clung to the cliffside like fragile shadows, defiant against a mountain that sought to break them. They reached a plateau, and there in the snow lay bones scattered like broken prayers. The narrator said, not all who sought truth returned to speak of it. Jonathan Hale knelt, brushing ice from a cracked skull. Jonathan Hale whispered, this man came searching, and he paid the price. Evelyn Carter stepped back, voice trembling, is this what waits for us too? The wind shrieked, carrying dread across the plateau. The narrator said, the mountain leaves reminders of those who dared and failed. Jonathan Hale stared at the remains, his resolve hardening even as Evelyn Carter's fear deepened. That night, the informant returned, his cloak heavy with frost, his eyes burning with riddles. The narrator said, mysteries speak in fragments, never in full. Informant, said the shadow, you chase lives beyond reason. To find it is to lose yourself. Jonathan Hale demanded, show us where it dwells. Evelyn Carter whispered urgently, he wants us lost, Jonathan. The informant tilted his head, voice echoing like wind in caves. Informant, said I, give paths, not answers. Then he vanished into the snow, leaving silence heavier than before. The narrator said, every clue cuts deeper into uncertainty. As dawn broke, arguments tore the camp apart. The narrator said, trust phrase when fear takes root. Evelyn Carter said, this madness will end us. We should turn back before we vanish like the rest. Jonathan Hale's eyes blazed. I will not abandon what we've come for. The deceiver stepped forward, smiling faintly, fueling the fire. Deceiver, said, perhaps Evelyn is right. The mountain does not want you here, Jonathan. Jonathan Hale glared, suspicion sharp as a blade. The narrator whispered, in every silence between words, betrayal grows louder. Snow drifted around them as tension cut deeper than the cold. The breaking point came when the betrayer revealed their hand. That night, Jonathan Hale discovered his supplies slashed, maps stolen, trust shattered. The narrator said, betrayal burns colder than snow. Jonathan Hale shouted, who did this? Evelyn Carter gasped, her voice cracking, Jonathan. It was not me. From the shadows, the deceiver smiled knowingly, but another figure stepped forward, once an ally, now enemy. Betrayer said, I could not let you find it. Some truths destroy more than they heal. The narrator whispered, when betrayal cuts deepest, the seeker bleeds but does not fall. Jonathan Hale's rage burned hotter than fire. The betrayal left Jonathan Hale standing alone, his breath heavy in the silent storm. The narrator said, isolation is the crucible where truth either breaks or hardens. Jonathan Hale stared at the torn map, anger and despair twisting within him. Jonathan Hale muttered, they think this will stop me, but nothing will. The mountains loomed, cruel and indifferent, their shadows stretching like walls. Evelyn Carter called faintly in the distance, but Jonathan Hale did not answer. The narrator whispered, the seeker walks most dangerous when he walks alone. Snow fell thicker, veiling the world, yet his steps pressed forward into darkness. Hours later, Evelyn Carter reached him, pulling him back from the cliff's edge. The narrator said even broken trust can be bound by loyalty. Evelyn Carter's voice cracked, you cannot do this alone, Jonathan. Let me stand with you. Jonathan Hale's eyes softened with reluctant acceptance, though his jaw remained tight. Jonathan Hale said, then we face this together, no matter what it takes. Snowflakes swirled around them, their figures small against the vast white. The narrator whispered, "In the shadow of betrayal, new bonds can still hold firm." For the first time, their steps fell in rhythm. The fire crackled as Jonathan Hale finally turned on the deceiver. The narrator said, "Masks crumble under relentless eyes." Jonathan Hale's voice cut sharp. "You twist words and lead us in circles. What truth do you bury?" The deceiver's smile faltered, his voice trembling. "I sought only to protect what should never be found." Evelyn Carter's voice hardened. "You wanted to lead us astray, not protect us." The narrator said, "Deception falters when light burns through shadow." The deceiver turned away, his false confidence crumbling, silence heavier than denial. Jonathan Hale's fury glowed brighter than the fire itself. Deeper into the mountains, they uncovered the truth of the victim. The narrator said, "Every secret bleeds through the past." Frozen in ice lay remains of a man, his satchel torn, his face half hidden by frost. Jonathan Hale bowed his head, whispering, "So this is where your story ended." Evelyn Carter's voice trembled. "He was chasing the same shadow as us." The narrator whispered, "The dead speak without words, guiding the living toward what waits." Jonathan Hale placed the faded photograph beside the body, his hand trembling with reverence. Silence draped the valley like mourning cloth. That night, Jonathan Hale stood at the ridge, the mountains glowing beneath the moon. The narrator said, "Truth stands close, and its shadow grows long." A howl echoed, deep and haunting, rolling through the peaks. Jonathan Hale whispered, "It's here." Evelyn Carter gripped his arm, her voice unsteady. "Jonathan, what if the truth is worse than the myth?" His eyes never left the dark ridges. Jonathan Hale said, "Then the world must see it." The narrator whispered, "The seeker no longer hunts shadows. Now the shadow begins to hunt him." The night trembled with unseen footsteps in the snow. The mountain held its breath as the keeper of secrets finally stepped from the shadows. The narrator said, "Truth's last guardian never reveals willingly." The keeper's voice echoed cold. "You will not unearth what was meant to stay buried." Jonathan Hale stood firm, his eyes burning with defiance. Jonathan Hale said, "You cannot guard lies with silence forever." Evelyn Carter whispered, "Jonathan, he will stop at nothing." The narrator said, "The final struggle is not against beasts of snow, but against men who bind truth in chains." Snow whipped between them, like time itself trembling before revelation. The confrontation grew fierce as Jonathan Hale and the keeper of secrets clashed with words sharper than blades. The narrator said, "Conviction strikes harder than steel when truth is at stake." Jonathan Hale shouted, "Every lie you guard only strengthens the truth." The keeper's tone thundered, "The world cannot bear what waits in those peaks." Evelyn Carter stepped forward, her voice steady. "The world decides, not you." The narrator whispered, "Truth burns brightest when spoken in defiance of silence." The storm screamed around them, snow swirling like sparks from an unseen fire. Then it came. A roar from the cliffs, deeper than thunder, shaking snow loose from jagged peaks. The narrator said, "When myth awakens, silence dies." From the ridge, a towering shadow moved, its outline massive, its presence undeniable. Jonathan Hale's voice trembled with awe. "It's real. The Yeti lives." Evelyn Carter gripped his arm, whispering, "Jonathan, we should run." The keeper of secrets fell to his knees, his face pale with dread. The narrator said, "Truth does not ask for belief. It simply exists." The beast's eyes glimmered like embers in the storm, watching, ancient and unyielding. The Yeti roared again, echoing through the valley as snow cascaded from cliffs. The narrator said, "Legends bleed into reality when fear and awe collide." Jonathan Hale whispered, "This is the truth I've sought my whole life." Evelyn Carter said, "And it may be the truth that ends us." The keeper of secrets shouted desperately, "You see now why it must remain hidden." The narrator whispered, "In revelation lies both wonder and ruin." The wind carried the beast's breath, hot against the freezing air, as its massive form loomed closer. Hearts pounded like drums of war in their chests. The beast vanished into the storm, leaving silence heavier than before. The narrator said, "Truth revealed is never fully kept nor fully shared." Jonathan Hale fell to his knees, whispering, "The world will never believe what we saw." Evelyn Carter placed a hand on his shoulder, her voice steady. "But we will carry it." The keeper of secrets turned away, his power broken, his silence shattered. The narrator whispered, "Legends live not in books or whispers, but in the eyes of those who dared to see." The mountain stood timeless, holding both secrets and truths within its frozen heart.